Hey everyone. Now that the groups are formed, I want to basically do a short walkthrough through some of the material I put online. So I did put a lot of stuff online, and this is basically because the next week is basically all about your group setup, about getting to know your team, about getting to know more about Git, figuring out the software, and so forth. So here are a bunch of documents which are important for you. So the one is the kickoff document. Kickoff document is one of the documents. It will be valid for your whole session. It's pretty long, and I basically put the table of content in here. So it goes over a couple expectations. So it basically says what you gotta do. You're supposed to use Agile software development. So Scrum, basically what the one module in this week was about. Here you basically have the due dates. So we kick off. You have an individual setup which you need to have done. It's an assignment on Canvas. You have a group exercise which you have to work on in the range of 21st to 24th. I already put it online so you can start earlier, of course. Then you have a couple of days for your sprint planning. Then you actually conduct your sprint. Then the sprint ends, all coding stops. And then you have some time for your retrospective review and sprint planning. So this is basically the circle that was explained in the lecture, and then you do that circle all over again 2 more times. Important, I expect roughly 500 lines of code per sprint. The first sprint is a little different because it doesn't have a lot of coding in it, but for sprint 2 and sprint 3, expect at least 500 lines of code per sprint. Valuable code that actually does something. I'm not going to count lines of code, but I'm going to look at how significant is it. Is it worth 500 lines of code? You should at least commit something to get up 2 times a week. So don't just commit at the very end of the sprint. You have to deliver full working software at the end of each sprint. You have to include the quality construction modules. So we're going to do review, unit test, static analysis, of course, the GitHub workflow. All of these you have to employ in your project. You have to put everything on your Scrum board. I talk about the Scrum board in the lecture slides a whole lot, so you'll need the Tiger board and you need to work with it. And on December 6th, you have to have a full working software. You have to do little video presentations, basically your sprint reviews. You have to fill out an individual survey after each sprint. This is mandatory. That's going to be graded. You'll have a Scrum Master and a Git Master. I talk about these roles in the lecture slides. So these will be important. You have to hold at least 3 stand-up meetings. I'm talking about this in the group exercise. So you can do these distributed, doesn't mean, or asynchronously. You don't have to really meet, but you got to read your answers. You don't have to post meeting notes on Tiger. I will change that. We'll just have all of this on Slack. And then the expectations is that you work at least 10 hours per week on the project. And this does exclude assignments and prep time and figuring out your tooling. Scrum is supposed to be lightweight, so not spending a lot of time on the process, but it will take you some time to get used to it. So real and your project Scrum is a little different. Um, since you don't really have a product owner, I'm kind of the product owner, but I'm not writing your product backlog for you. Your Scrum Master will be part of your team, which is different, and of course, you're not full-time developers. You're required to use Java. You are not required to use Eclipse, however. So you can use IntelliJ or others. You will be working on a given software. It's not a great software, and that is on purpose. It's buggy and it has a lot of dependencies, and that is done on purpose, since usually when you start working somewhere, you'll not work on the most beautiful software. You'll usually get a bunch of spaghetti code and you got to figure it out. So this is what this is about, and you're supposed to enhance it and make it better. And you basically have, I think I included now 5 projects, topics basically, and you can choose one of them. And you'll see the topics on here somewhere, a description of possible topics. So you can choose one of them. Okay. GitHub and Taiga will be really important. I'll provide these to you. There's a GitHub housekeeping document already on Canvas under the project module. Take a look. There's a deliverable X document. Let me show you here. This is the quality policy document since I have it open. in which I want you to add more and more information as we go. You see the dates when I want this in here and a little bit of description, and I'm going to go over what exactly I want in the lectures. But in here, you have basically, this is going to be your documentation. So this thing, you will copy it for each sprint, have it deliverable 1, 2, 3. You will say what sprint number is for Scrum Master, Git Master, what you did in your sprint planning. You have dates for attendees in your meeting and your daily scrums, your meeting minutes, kind of a short information. How does your burn down chart look? This will become more important later on. Travis CI will be important starting in sprint 3, and any additional information you want to give me. Meeting summary, so basically who attended how many meetings. You'll have stuff for your sprint review, for your link and your question you have to answer in here. Information about your sprint retrospective and a couple of questions you have to answer. You will have to provide me with some contribution information in here. And then you have a checklist which you can check off so you see that everything is done. So this is kind of what I expect to be done at the end of every sprint. So it's some work, but basically you'll have it all in here. You'll have it on GitHub, and you keep on editing this while you work. So it shouldn't be like extra work. Taiga is your Scrum board. You have to have your product backlog and sprint backlog on there, and it was explained in the lecture videos. For the deliverables, you don't have a submission really, but I'm going to look at your GitHub repository, at your Taiga Scrum board, at your Slack communication, and your individual survey. And for getting started with your sprint, you do your individual setup PDF, do your group exercise, you have a different assignment for that, and then you conduct your sprint planning. This is the sprint 1 planning, and you'll see all of this. I didn't include the group exercise in here yet, but I will, and it's also on Canvas already. Sprint planning details, that is one. Individual setup is the other. These are the possible topics and the grading information. Okay. Transitioning between sprints, this is going to be important after sprint 2. This basically, I'm not going to go over this because you don't need it yet. I'm going to do a separate video for that, but it basically describes how you're going to transition from one sprint to another. You have to read this document carefully. It's going to be valid for your whole session. And when you have a question, well, it's likely that it is answered in the kickoff document. Okay, then you have these documents here. Let me also go to the modules page, because on here you basically have these exercises. So this is your team exercise. It's something supposed to be a little fun to get to know your team members, learn a little bit more about Git and work with it in your team, and also talk about who is going to be the Scrum Master and Git Master. So little things like that. The individual setup for your project is a little bit different. It's making you work with memoranda a little bit. It's making you work with Git a little bit, and make sure you have all the software installed that is needed. And Sprint 1 planning basically walks you through what do you have to need to get to do to get started. You have an initial Scrum board, which I'm going to give you, and you have to copy it. You have to edit some stuff. You have to change some things and make it all basically into yours so that you can then start your sprint. When we look at the schedule here, let me go here for a second. Where's my schedule? Here. So basically, here's your Git assignment, which is due. Here you should latest start with your team exercise and communicating with your team members. You already have this stuff, so you can already start here, right? And talk with your team members, get your setup done, get your tooling done, so you get all of this done. Here you should start your sprint, so then when the next week starts on the 28th, you're all ready to start your sprint, start with your coding, and enhance the memoranda software. If you're done earlier with all this stuff here, feel free to start earlier. Okay, so that is totally up to you. So this is a rough overview of basically the project stuff. Here you have the GitHub housekeeping document. It gives another summary of what I expect you to do in GitHub, which you should then put, let me go here again, I'm sorry for going back and forth, into this document and describe your GitHub workflow. And this is a workflow you should stick to. Okay, thank you for watching, and as always, if you have any questions, please let me know on Slack. Ask me. I don't want you to be stuck on things. Talk with your team members. Teamwork is crazy important in here. It's important that you communicate, and I think many people, many groups were not really successful, and the main reason was that they didn't communicate. They didn't know what they were doing. The others didn't know what other people were working on. So if you have a good communication, that is a first step in having a good and functioning group. Okay, have fun. Thanks for listening, and I'll hear you next time. See you next time.